George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
According to the Daily Mail, the biggest selling newspaper in Britain, Vladimir Putin is already dead. And when you consider all of the grave illnesses that he's been reported to have been suffering this last 90 days, it's a wonder that he actually isn't dead. A miracle that the Russian economy is amongst the best performing economies in the world, and the ruble the best performing currency in the world. And then, of course, there's the course of the war. There were 2 people dead in Pakistan when Imran Khan, the lawful prime minister of a country of 220 million people armed with nuclear weapons, was being pushed to the brink of civil war by the United States regime change operation. And there were plenty of dead children in Texas. 19 little primary school children shot dead along with their 2 brave teachers, one of whose widower dropped dead of a heart attack on hearing the news. Hard to exaggerate the depth of the crisis for those who want to retain weapons of mass destruction in the United States of America. Still, lots of thoughts and prayers coming from the National Rifle Association. And, of course, there are plenty dead in the Palestine-Israel conflict over many decades. I speak as a swarm of flag-waving fanatics storm one of the holiest places in Islam, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the old city of Jerusalem. Fanatic, fascistic, frenzied. Who knows where it will end up when darkness really falls? So fasten your seatbelts. We'll be dealing with all of this and more, including Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. It's all coming up over the next nearly 3 hours on the mother of all talk shows. It is rock and roll. Used to be radio, now just pictures.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Of course, if you are one of those who believes that Vladimir Putin is dead and that the person you're seeing on television is a body double, then you're an idiot. The problem is there are plenty of idiots. And we've been told over the last 90 days that Putin has brain cancer, that he has stomach cancer, that he's had a stroke, that he has Alzheimer's, that he is senile, that he's grooming his rock and roll daughter to take over. All war propaganda, and only fools believe it, especially those of you who lived through the run-up to and the course of the Iraq war. It is a long and serried story, however. The growth of war propaganda hoaxes started in Britain, and we'll be enclosing a small package on that, an ongoing package. We'll be looking at false flags and false propaganda over the next few weeks. Of course, the opposite is true in Russia, and that's the problem. We who struggled to lift a huge stone and dropped it on our own feet are rapidly heading to rack and ruin. Our economies are in dire crisis. Our prices are rocketing. Our shortages multiplying, our currencies falling, and the outlook is grim for next winter, with gas at double the price that it was last winter, and petrol and diesel virtually unaffordable for large sections of the population. But for the goods that are transported on the roads, there being virtually no freight railway facilities available, all of the extra petrol and diesel costs are going to be added to the costs already rocketing of essential foodstuffs. Never mind, the Queen's crown is back on the pint glass, just when not that many people drink out of pint glasses anymore. I'm not one of those who ever has. But when I see how the alcohol business is going, it seems to me merely totemistic for Boris Johnson to bring back the Queen's crown. I've got no problem with imperial weights and measures. They never left me. I've never thought or spoken in any other language other than pounds and stones and gallons and even furlongs, but that's another story. So Boris Johnson is flag waving. Not that the existence of flags are themselves a problem. The ones in Regent Street in the heart of London celebrating the 70th Jubilee of Her Majesty the Queen look perfectly fine for me and no more or less than I would have expected. Staying in the same job for 70 years when you're the head of state is no mean achievement, and I hope the Queen lives longer still. But this must be the end of it. Britain deserves a referendum upon the eventual passing of Her Majesty the Queen so that we get a chance to say whether or not we've grown up or not, whether or not we want a grown-up form of government or not. It doesn't have to be a President Macron. It can be a titular president that nobody else in the world ever hears of, who merely signs off on legislation and doesn't take to the airwaves to opine against legislation that doesn't fit the worldview of, say, Prince Charles, or harm the financial interests of the firm, the royal family. I want to have a republic in Britain, and I will fight for it. It's my democratic right to do so, and I'm demanding a referendum on the passing of the Queen, on the whole future of Britain's democracy. There are flags aplenty, of course, rampaging through the narrow alleyways of the old city of Jerusalem right at this minute. Israeli flags were unfurled inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque, risking a regional conflagration, given the warnings that have emanated both from Lebanon and from Gaza, that any desecration of this holy place in Islam will lead to a military response. It's hard to believe that the Prime Minister of Israel really wanted all of this, in which case he's plainly so weak that he cannot stand up to the zealots, millions of them, who will not rest until the extirpation of every last Palestinian and every last Muslim and Christian holy place from the Holy Land. This is dicing with disaster. Once upon a time, wiser councils in the European Union and in Washington would have cautioned against this so-called flag march. But those councils are no longer wise and are in any case fixated on something and somewhere quite different. And that, of course, is the war with Ukraine. It is plainly obvious now and admitted regularly by spokespeople and officials and the smart newspapers in the United States that the war in Ukraine is a proxy war between the United States and the Russian Federation. So I'm not going to waste time on arguing that point, except to the blind and willfully ignorant. That must already be a given. Why then is Russia winning it? Big time. We were told, because we only have one side of the story in Western countries, the other side of the story having been criminalized, literally criminalized in Britain. If I were to give an interview on, say, RT, I would be open to prosecution and imprisonment for up to 7 years, perhaps next door to Julian Assange, who's also, of course, the other side of the story, who's been criminalized out of public life. But I see other forms of information. And if you don't, let me tell you that the Russian armed forces are on a remarkable, successful sweep in the eastern part of the country, such that by the end of this summer there will be 2 Ukraines. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, again, that's not what I wanted, and certainly not what I expected. But it was made inevitable by the failure of the regime in Kiev to implement the Minsk II agreements that they themselves signed, guaranteed by the governments of Germany and France, and by the order to attack the Donbass by the then fascist-led Ukrainian forces in the eastern line of control, a copy of which order has been produced in Moscow today. That makes the Russian intervention under international law, under RTP, remember that one? The right to protect, actually a legal incursion into the country. How about that then? Nobody was expecting that one. And of course, the authors of the right to protect were Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. And they used it to invade Yugoslavia, dismember it, and bomb its capital, Belgrade, for the best part of 90 days. Almost exactly the same amount of time that Russia has been fighting in the Ukraine. If this order is legitimate, and I have seen no evidence that it is not, then it means that Zelensky was about to send his hordes into a full-scale massacre of the Russian-speaking and ethnically Russian population in the Donbass. No wonder then that the intervention in the Ukraine took place. But I didn't want it. I wanted it to be avoided. Somebody asked me on television the other day if I supported the war. I told them I oppose the war. I've opposed it since it began 8 long years ago. And it's the failure of other people to oppose it 8 long years ago that has left us in the mess that we are now in. And of course, the war is only one side of the story. The economic war, which has been launched against Russia, has been, if anything, an even bigger disaster for its authors. The United States, the United Kingdom, and the various satrapies throughout the European Union who have been prevailed upon to participate in an economic war in which plainly they were the losers from the first day. You may not remember now, after all, it was some 80 days ago, the exultation that the ruble was going to be crushed into rubble, into small pebbles. That's what they said. That may even be what they thought. 90 days later, the ruble is the best performing currency in the world. The Russians have sold everything that they have extracted or manufactured that might have gone to the West. They've sold it to the East and cannot actually keep up with demand, particularly for oil and gas and wheat, though there are many other vital raw materials that Russia produces and used to sell to us and which we are now desperately short of. They have gas and oil and petrol and diesel and wheat and raw materials in abundance and dirt cheap. We, on the other hand, are suffering grave shortages of all of them, and the prices are rocketing through the roof. It is, in this sunny clime, perhaps difficult to imagine what the situation in Western countries is going to be like come the winter time, which is only, of course, 4 or 5 months away. When we need our heating, when we need to drive for we cannot walk or cycle in the inclement weather, when our factories are running out of power and have to go on short time or even close down altogether, and mass unemployment already rocketing as a result of the economic destruction of the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures that were taken to address it, when they all start coming home to roost, what then for the Western governments that so foolishly went over the cliff with the lemming-like enthusiasm at the order of a man not fit to be sent out for a loaf, for increasingly he wouldn't be able to find one. It's come to something that the only two statespeople, yes, I use that word, in the United States talking any sense about how to get out of this disaster are Henry Kissinger, aged 99 and with more blood on his hands than anyone alive in the world today, and Donald J. Trump. Don't take my word for the latter. Take Noam Chomsky, the great man of letters, the great man of the left. He said, the only statesman who understands how we have to get out of this is Donald Trump, and he's right. And here's something I want to add that not many people, oddly, have begun to take account of. In every opinion poll in the United States, especially the last one, Donald Trump trounces Joe Biden in every single battleground state. If that continues, and it's hard to believe it's going to go into reverse, then the next president of the United States is going to be Donald Trump. And he's going to reset all of America's foreign and military policy objectives. And all of these lemmings that jumped off the cliff at the order of Joe Biden are going to want to climb back up that cliff because the orders from Washington will change in just 2 years from now. NATO, which has grown so fat and overblown and giddy with its newfound centrality in Western life, is going to be cut down to size. Trump's America is going to be an America first America. It's going to be an isolationist America. It's going to be America that doesn't want to go to war everywhere that the president drops his hat. Just think about that. Plainly, our own people in power in Western countries have not done so. Lastly, Tony Blair is back in the news. His son, who's in his 20s, I think, perhaps early 30s, has just bought a house for £22 million. That's $35 million or so. A man in his 20s or early 30s. How did he get so rich? How did Tony Blair get 27 houses? That's when I counted it, when I was making a film about him. Leaving aside the filthy lucre in which Mr. Blair rolls nightly like a Dorian Gray figure, and it shows, will not save him on the judgment day. Of that I'm certain. But you're about to hear much more of him. He is launching a new Macron-esque centrist political force, just in advance of being given by Her Majesty a knighthood in June in Windsor. He's even bringing Macron to speak at it. Such is his lack of confidence in the block of wood running his former political party, the Labour Party, he wants to start something new in the centre ground, as if Keir Starmer wasn't centrist enough. Keir Starmer, the man who, without qualification, supports the Israel on parade in the old city of Jerusalem this evening, and the Labour friends of apartheid that he is the emblem of. Blair doesn't trust him as a likely winner of any British general election. So President Macron is coming to England. Lock up your mothers. It's all coming up over the next 3 hours because it's the mother of all talk shows. Talk TV, it was years in the making. It hired, I've no doubt, at a salary in the millions, Piers Morgan as its frontman. It has completely flopped, like all of the sofa politics television in Britain. Far too many of them singing exactly the same song, interviewing exactly the same people, taking exactly the same line on every matter, from domestic to international. The reason that our numbers are exponentially larger than a multi-million pound operation run out of Rupert Murdoch Towers. We are different, but we are free to speak our minds. Nobody tells us what to think or what to say. That goes for me, it goes for my far more interesting guests. Amongst English-speaking people around the world, this show is completely unique. But it's an endangered species. Some people have been incredibly kind and generous, giving far more than we ask for. So if you are, and you know who you are, amongst those who've given really generously, then please take a holiday. Don't keep giving. Because I'm after that big audience, and I'm asking you only for $1. Is this show not worth $1? You don't have to buy a license fee and get sent to jail if you don't to watch the mother of all talk shows. I'm asking for $1 or £1 if you are in Britain, or €1 if you are in Ireland or elsewhere in the European Union.
George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. Join us at the College of Knowledge, where there are no tuition fees.
Let me launch the poll. Will background checks for guns be introduced in the United States? A, yes, B, no. You can vote on my Twitter feed, blue tick, with a foolish Russian state-affiliated media stamp on it. I started my court action in Dublin against Twitter to have that removed and seek compensation for the damage that it has done. You can vote on my YouTube channel. If you are watching on my YouTube channel, don't forget to subscribe. I'm this close to reaching 200,000 subscribers, and I'm unusually determined to get to that level. And on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, you can vote in the poll on that. Will background checks for guns be introduced in the US? A, yes, B, no. Now, the phone numbers, of course, I should give you also. If you're in the United Kingdom, it's completely free to call us. It's 08 081 965522. That's 08 081 965522. If you're in the United States or Canada, it's also toll free, cost you nothing at all. It's +1 844 944 3344. That's +1 844 944 3344. You can email the show anytime at onair@moats.tv. And don't forget, although the Sunday show is now secure, we hope to bring back the midweek MOATS very shortly. But we can only do it if we can raise the funding for it. Ditto the podcast. So please donate to the show on the super chat function on YouTube. That's the easiest, quickest way to do it. Any amount any denomination, any currency that you like. Just go to the Super Chat, and your chat, your comment will be prioritized, and I will try to read it out. Now, in a sane America, as I have said many times before, my next guest would be the President of the United States, with Chris Hedges as his Secretary of State. And he'd be phoning me in Downing Street to form a coalition of the willing to come to the rescue of the Palestinians in Jerusalem. It's only a dream. But Richard Wolff is not a dream. He's Professor of Economics, founder of Democracy at Work, host of Economic Update, and author of Understanding Socialism. Professor Wolff, thank you very much for coming back on the mother of all talk shows. It's been a while, but I've been following your output, so I know your perspective on these things, but many in the audience will not. I wonder if I could start by asking you to describe the economic situation in the United States this day.
Well, first of all, thank you, George Galloway, for your kind words. I appreciate them, and I share your dreams on that subject, and I look forward to the call to Downing Street if I can get your voice instead of the awful voices that normally answer the phone over there.
Exactly.
Here's the situation in a nutshell. The United States, as you know, had a dismal failure in responding to COVID-19. We recently crossed 1 million dead Americans from the disease, and countless millions who are still struggling with it. We have a very strong surge of it now. And so our people have gone through a really terrible 2.5 years of that. As if that weren't enough, we had the crash, the economic crash, which people don't remember, although they should, is the second worst collapse of capitalism, second only to the Great Depression of the 1930s. And that took the last 2.5 years. As if that wasn't enough. And to give you just one statistic about the economic crash, more than 1/2 of the American working class, which numbers our worker numbers that the government gives us, it's about 150 to 160 million Americans are in the labor force. Over 80 million, that is over half of them, were unemployed for some period of time between March of 2020 and the end of 2021. Every family was affected, every community, every small business dependent on these workers and their wages has been very badly hurt. And now, over the last 12 months, as if to make a bad situation worse, we have had a very bad inflation. The government numbers, 8.5%. Compared to, for example, the annual rate of increase of wages in this country, on average, 4%, less than half the increase in prices, which means if you're even among the minority of workers who got any increase at all, the increase you got, with very few exceptions, still leaves you with a lower standard of living than you had 6 months or a year ago. And the final thing, the inflation is so bad, lasting so long, far beyond what the Federal Reserve, our central bank, predicted, what it promised. It is devastating an already really badly hurt working class. We are now told that we are in the early months of an attempt to control the inflation by raising interest rates. And please recognize, we are a more indebted country today than at any time in America's history. The government is more in debt, corporations are more in debt, and households are more in debt. All of the burden of that debt is now going to be raised by raising interest rates. Literally, we are an economy that is in disarray, in a kind of disintegration, with policy going herky-jerky this way, that way, and all of it coming down on the mass of the people, as a result of which the tension in our society, the political divisions, literally the shooting of innocent children, all of these things are emerging out of a society that to more and more people seems to be spinning out of control, especially in the economy.
Well, Lucas, as someone with American blood in my veins, I hear the pain of that survey you just gave us quite acutely. Many others, though, in the world will be wondering why, with America such a sick man, that the political class does not put as much energy and effort and ingenuity into fixing its own problems at home as it does seeking to cause murder and mayhem across the world.
Well, I think the explanation lies in our history pretty much over the last half of a century. We have a much more unequal United States today than we did, for example, at the end of World War II. If you had ranked countries in terms of the gap between the richest and the poorest, we would have been one of the least unequal countries in the 1960s and 70s. European countries would have been worse than we. All of that has been reversed. We have now the dubious distinction of being the most unequal among the advanced industrial countries. And it's gotten worse and worse. And one consequence has been that politics has become literally the plaything of the tiny 1%, 2%, 3% at the very top. They have the time, they have the money to buy the political process, to buy the media, without which our politics does not work, to sustain the army of lobbyists who do most of the actual writing of legislation and the pressuring. The result is that for the mass of people, literally day by day, year by year, the political apparatus is more and more distant. There's a joke going around that the only thing more distant and beyond our reach than the American dream has become is the American political scene. That's even further gone. What I'm trying to get across is our politicians have learned that they have to do what the money tells them to do, or else the money will go to their adversary, they will be out, and the money person will be in. And so they say, and some of them have said it to me personally, I might as well do what the money wants, because if I don't, they'll get someone else who will, and that won't make anybody else better off. I'm still having at least a few ideas about what the mass of people want. But I think you can see now that more and more Americans, and not just left-wingers, right-wingers and people in the middle, understand that our political representatives don't represent anything other than the very top. People used to say it, but it has a hard reality now. And you can see it, for example, even in the extremity, the unspeakable extremity of the mass shootings that we now have every week or two in this country, including of children, young children, that there is a clear awareness that nothing is going to change. The National Rifle Association went ahead with its annual meeting, reiterated its position that the best solution to these shootings is to have more guns distributed more widely than they already are. We have the politicians who tell us they're going to do nothing, although the way you do that in this country is to say that you are praying. for the victims and their families. But that's the sure sign that that's where your activity is going to be over when you're done with your prayers. So there's a kind of depression. There's no nice word to say it. There's a depression about the politics in this country. If, as you suggested before, Mr. Trump runs and wins, it will be less because he's all that exciting, but it'll be that the mass of the people who he does not have are so disgusted, so alienated, so distant from the whole rhetoric and theater of politics that they will absolutely lose interest and not participate.
And emblematic of all of this is a White House adorned, if that's the word, by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. There's not much more you can say about Biden, and so I won't. But the more I see of Kamala Harris, the more I wonder if she's on the same planet as me. And Trump beats either of them. He beats them by a country mile if he is the nominee of the Republicans in 24. Surely something has to give, Richard.
Yes, and I think, and I know that I have to be careful, we all do, not to let our wishes overwhelm our intellect and what we can really see and demonstrate. But having said that, and with that self-awareness, we are seeing a level of left-wing labor militancy that I have never seen in my lifetime. I was born in the middle of the United States in the state of Ohio. I've lived and worked here all my life. I have never, not in the 1960s, never have I seen the kind of bottom-up agitation among working people, particularly younger ones, who are now demanding changes in their workplaces, demanding the right to go ahead and form a union, often working outside of the old traditional union apparatus because it hasn't kicked into gear, at least not yet, with a few exceptions, and those exceptions are important. But I'm seeing young people, including in the university classes that I still teach, that give me real hope. That generation, now in their 20s and 30s, they're not being fooled by any of this. They understand exactly where they are. And by the way, they do not favor Donald Trump. Those Gallup and other polls that he gets show that the younger you are in America, pretty across the board, the further to the left you tilt. And that was not always the way it was. And that does give me hope. Everything being done by the Jeffrey Bezos of this world or the Elon Musks of this world to squash the efforts of unions in fast food, in retail, in Amazon, in all the big employers here, they've failed. They cannot stop it. It is getting bigger and bigger. Literally, if you walk into a Starbucks coffee shop here in the United States, half of what you overhear as you order your coffee is conversations among the workers, between the workers and the customers, about a union, about a decent job. And this is part of what's going on. The media will be the last ones to understand it and even later to report on it. For them, the excitement is on the right. But I can tell you that I am very reinforced, I am encouraged, and that's not a strong enough word, by what is happening below the radar among working people, particularly the young.
A message of hope on which to end. Professor Richard Wolff, the maestro, thank you for your tour of the American horizon. Thanks for joining us. Let me take a quick break, and then it's the one and only Faran Fronczak. Tom says after independence we could choose the government we want. Tom, could you not have called me and argued that nonsense? Couldn't you? What's wrong with you, man? And Ben says, could Scotland actually do better autonomously? Like I want California to secede, but I think we'd thrive if not burdened by the rest of the US. How very revealing of you, Ben. How utterly revealing of you. And Philip says, how any Labour or Tory supporter has the nerve to say the SNP are corrupt is beyond me. Why do you people not have the guts to call up instead of cowering behind one single name on social media? Great kindness from some on that super chat thing I talked about earlier. Based Tanky, great name, $5. Love from the United States and Jackson Hinkle's community. Hats off to Jackson's community. Laurie Hall, $10. Thank you for being a voice of reason from Wisconsin, USA. Thank you, Laurie. Joe Tugas, $5. Fight on, George. Fight on for Julian. I will, Joe. And Dan Z, $10. Sir GG, thank you for all the work you do to prove the truth, facts, and realities. Tony Blair should be prosecuted. Indeed so. Thanks. Keep them coming in. The more of you who do it, the quicker we'll get back to a midweek MOATS, which a significant number of people think is worthwhile in these troubled times. I'll be in Newcastle later in June. We'll show you the details of that later. But if you haven't bought your tickets yet, please get them, because it's shaping up to be a great night up there in the Northeast. Later in the show, we will be entertaining, and they'll be entertaining us for a very first time, a Member of Parliament from South Africa, Shaik Emam MP, who is a member of the National Assembly for South Africa and leader of the National Freedom Party. I don't know the National Freedom Party. I look forward to hearing more about it. But I did see the gentleman's speech in the Parliament of South Africa on the Russia-Ukraine war. And I thought that you would probably like to hear his point of view. The one and only Lee Camp, not redacted here, not by any means. A man who's been hunted from pillar to post by the big tech monopolies, but who still keeps on making us laugh and making us think. He'll be up in the show also. And then the one and only James Giles. You'll recall him as my sometimes stand-in. It's not often I don't turn up for work, but when I don't, I know that James Giles is capable of stepping into the breach. He's a teenage protege, at least when I met him, but he's now Britain's youngest councillor. I think he's the youngest. We'll discover that when he comes on. So he's now an elected official. Whether that's made him any more, I don't know, less than loquacious, I doubt, but we will see. Now, Rumama Daoud says, I wish George didn't praise Trump so much. Praise him? When did I praise him? I quoted Noam Chomsky about him. He is, in fact, a man who's talking sense about the need to get out of the war between Russia and Ukraine and NATO. What do you want me to say, that he isn't? Or that Joe Biden is? Have we got Faran? If we do, then we will. Yeah, this is my lovely new baby. It's called Black Lake. It is the sequel to Queensway. And if you bought Queensway, you'll definitely want to buy this. And in fact, you can buy both of them together for £8.99 for 2 books. Part 2 and part 1 of was going to be a trilogy, but I'm enjoying writing it so much, I think it might go on and on. There's part one now. Queensway, very proud of these two covers. The quality of the design is first class. For those who don't know, it presupposes that Hitler did manage to cross the channel, did manage to conquer some of our country. And some of our countrymen and women were collaborators, but others formed the resistance. And that resistance fought the Nazi occupier tooth and nail. It's counterfactual history, but some of it very nearly came through. Now, Faran Fronczak is my colleague, journalist and radio host, but more importantly in this proximate moment is the woman that knows everything about the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, which came to its end on Friday. Faran, welcome to the show. It seemed to me, from this distance, quite a dramatic end to the trial. From this distance, it looked like the allegations against Depp didn't look nearly as strong at the end of the trial as they did at the beginning. Have I got that wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And the end, I don't think Shakespeare could have written this trial better, believe it or not. I actually was in the courtroom last week, monitoring and sitting there. You know, folks were standing in line starting at 1 a.m. the night before. Thankfully, as a member of the media, I was able to show up there a little bit later, around like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And these trial days are long. The judge actually tacked on an hour where they were going from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. As you said, the jury just broke for deliberations on Friday. People were wondering if they were going to come to a verdict on Friday. They did not. So they're going to be back in the courtroom on Tuesday at 9 a.m. But George, the one part that was really, really shocking in this trial is you already had Johnny Depp and Amber Heard going on the stand against each other, basically countering whatever Johnny said. She countered it. She also countered about 16 witnesses on the Depp team, saying that they were essentially all liars. She finally, on the very last day, the last witness in true Amber Heard fashion was Amber Heard. And the cross-examination from Johnny Depp's lawyer, Camille Vasquez, was nothing short of monumental and explosive, where she basically said, so you're telling me that all of these people have lied and you're telling the truth. You had in the second to last day, you had a TMZ former field producer testify, because the big thing is who leaked these videos of Johnny Depp smashing his kitchen the morning that he found out $600 million had been embezzled from him. You find out it was Amber Heard and her team, while she's been denying this on the stand for the last 30 days in the trial. And to have this TMZ reporter come forward and actually risk going against a non-disclosure agreement, saying essentially, I got this from the source, that's why we were able to post it online so quickly, showing that she's perjured herself a number of times. And again, I don't think Shakespeare could have written a better trial. And this definitely will be made into a movie at some point down the road.
600. Most people would smash their kitchen when they found out that someone had embezzled $600 million. Even Shakespeare would have smashed up his kitchen.
He would have burned down the globe.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously two camps and two sides to this story. What were the most damaging things that emerged about Johnny Depp?
I think the biggest things that emerged that is no surprise to anyone is that he is a drug user and he has addiction problems. And that, you know, the other thing that kind of has emerged through a lot of this is he has very flowery language when it comes to his text messages, especially in regards to Amber Heard after he had kind of called it quits with her. And the difference, though, is that on the stand, Johnny Depp didn't deny any of this. He said that he had problems with opioids. He said that he had problems with drugs and alcohol. Whereas you had Amber, who they know had a massive cocaine addiction, denied it and said that she hadn't done it since she was 18 years old. And then all these people come out of the woodwork being like, no, that's not true. But then on the very last day, she'll say, I'm not a saint and I'm not up here pretending like I am one. And as an audience, people are watching this being like, have you watched yourself in the trial? Like, it's just, it's the goalpost keeps moving and the lies keep continuing, these alleged lies, because the stories are constantly changing with her. And, they're one way 10 days ago. Now we're at the last day. And now it's completely like you've been thrown in circles, which honestly, I think the Heard team only has left to do. They don't kind of follow a timeline. They didn't in their closing arguments, which left the audience very confused, and I'm sure left the jury confused. You have 9 jurors now. 2 have been deemed ultimates. 7 jurors. They all have to come to a unanimous decision. And what they're going to be deciding is who defamed who. Johnny Depp is suing her for $50 million. She's countersuing for $100 million. And whoever the jury decides it's going to be, I think that's going to kind of show they will be able to gain their reputation back, whether they choose Johnny or Amber. I think, though, George, it's going to go in the favor of Johnny Depp.
If that happens, what are the consequences? Presumably she doesn't have 50 million, at least not when she's paid her lawyers. And that presumably would be curtains for her acting career. Would the corollary also be true, that if Depp were to win, that we'd see him back on board sailing the Caribbean?
One of the things he did say is that he does not want to go back to the Pirates franchise. He said that he wouldn't even go back for 300 million and 300 alpacas, which is why, if you've been watching the trial and on Twitter, they've had alpacas outside the courthouse every day dressed as pirates. I kid you not. I mean, this is truly a spectacle. And being at the Fairfax County Courthouse myself, I mean, I was like, okay, this might be exaggerated. And then you're there and you're like, no, these people are doing this. But he said that he does not want to be back in the franchise. They're talking about Margot Robbie, not replacing him, but bringing a new character into the Pirates franchise. But you're right. If she does lose, she's not going to be able to pay that $50 million. And honestly, I don't think Johnny Depp cares at this point, because he's spent millions of dollars on this trial to begin with. This has been going on this is 6 years in the making, and actually ended, George, it ended Friday, the 27th, not only his daughter Lily Rose's birthday, but it ended on the anniversary that she filed a temporary restraining order where she walked to the courthouse in downtown LA with a bruise on her face. And then the next day was appearing in the streets of LA with nothing on her face. So it was kind of fitting and ironic that it ended on that day. But if he wins, his next movie is a blockbuster, hands down. For her, it's going to be very hard to get work. But even if she can't pay, they'll find some way for her to pay. But I don't think at this point with Johnny, it's about the money. It's about his name and his reputation.
Now, speaking of bruises, Kate Moss came to his defense. That must have been big news.
Yeah. So how that all came about is Amber the first time she was on the stand, she was talking in regards to a moment that her and Johnny Depp had on the set of stairs in their penthouse with her sister Whitney Heard, or now Whitney Enriquez. And she said that she punched Johnny in defense of her sister because she thought he was going to throw her down the stairs. And in this narrative that she was telling, she said, all I could think of was Kate Moss, Kate Moss. If you see video, you see his lawyer, Ben Shue, kind of turn around and do like a yes. And the reason why is they couldn't bring Kate Moss as a witness unless she mentioned that incident. So the reason why he's doing that is the minute she mentioned her name, Kate Moss came in. Now, we thought that Kate Moss was going to be by video deposition, meaning this was done prior. She came on live via Zoom. Her testimony was maybe 3 minutes. They asked her strictly of what happened on the stairs. She said, we were in Jamaica. It was a rainstorm. I was walking behind Johnny. I slipped, landed on my back. He carried me into the bedroom and took care of me the rest of the evening. So it went from what Amber Heard tried to narrate as this insane, crazy live or die moment with Kate Moss. She showed it as this romantic man who helped her in her time of need. 2 very different stories, which left, again, I'm sure the jurors stunned, but the audience was just as stunned, especially when they realized she was on live, not a previous deposition.
Now, lastly, you've solved a dilemma for me. I kept seeing the name Camille Vasquez trending and had no idea who Camille Vasquez was. Now I learn I presume it's a he.
No, it's a female. It's a female.
Is Depp's lead law. Oh, it's a female. Camille is a female lawyer. I once met Johnny Cochran, who was the counsel for O.J. Simpson, you'll recall. And I had followed that trial. And I went up to him in the Groucho Club in London and commended him for a legal performance, the likes of which I had never seen. Is this Camille Vasquez performance in that league?
You know, it's interesting because you also had Rob Kardashian, who was also on the OJ team, and Robert Shapiro. They also were very notable. But again, Johnny Cochran, I think, has "if the glove don't fit, you must acquit" line, which made him, celebrity famous. Yeah. It was so funny, George. When we left the courthouse, Johnny Depp and Amber, they go out the back end of the courthouse. His lawyers go out the front end. Everyone was out there cheering with signs, trying to take pictures with them. And I was with a colleague of mine who's a lawyer. We were covering it together. And he's like, I haven't seen lawyers get this famous before. And I was like, oh, remember Johnny Cochran? And I was like, this trial is our generation's OJ trial. And it's, I think now, mind you, that was more of a murder case with OJ Simpson, but this, I think the reason why people are so attached to it is A, they just want a distraction from all the war, death, and destruction going on in Europe. But two, I think what this is and I was thinking about it, whereas, it's the Me Too movement. No, I think it's bigger. I think people see so many times justice never comes to those who lie, who cheat, who steal, who try to set people up. I don't think that this would really matter if it was a man or a woman. I think it's that justice is coming forward and people are watching it in real time. Somebody who lied about somebody getting caught on their lies in the middle of a courtroom. And that's why people, I think, are so glued to the TV and watching it, because I'm not going to lie, she makes a great female villain in this too, because no matter how much she lies, she double downs on the lies. And I think in human society, we look at that and we're like, why are you doing this? And that's where I think people are seeing, for once, maybe in their lifetime, even though it's two celebrities that have all this money, they're seeing justice being served in a way that's truly never been seen before.
Don't do drugs. That's my takeaway from the whole thing. Yeah. Faran, thank you very much indeed. And if we get the verdict next week, which I'm pretty sure we will, we'll talk about it again maybe next weekend.
They're planning Tuesday or Wednesday morning.
Should follow. Everyone should follow Faran. Faran Balanced is her show. Where can people watch it, Faran?
So you can you can watch on my YouTube, Faran Balanced, Faran Balanced. We've been live streaming it. I've been learning so much about the law and courtroom etiquette and all that stuff, streaming with a ton of lawyers. They call it LawTube. So we've been on the case since its inception, and it's been a wild ride. And the fact that it's coming to an end, we don't know what we're going to do after this. At least I'm going to go back to regular journalism, but this trial has been a lot of fun to cover.
We should see if Camille will represent us in a class action on one or two things. You know what I mean. Faran Fronczak, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Again, I urge you to donate on the Super Chat plug. Donate any amount in any currency. Click Super Chat on the YouTube feed. Thanks so much if you've donated so far. Now, I told you earlier that I had been digging deeper into the history of hoaxes, war propaganda hoaxes. And it turned out that the father of wartime hoaxes was lying not that far from home. Take a look at this. So there lied Sir John Charteris. He may lie in a rural hamlet called Tinald in Dumfriesshire in his grave, but his lie lived on for the best part of 100 years. Indeed, it was reprised in the run-up to, during, and even long after the Iraq War, when it was claimed that Saddam Hussein had exactly the same kind of human rendering equipment. A people shredder, they called it. That was another lie. Of course, the most momentous lie was the one I referred to back in the graveyard, which was the hoax that led to American involvement in Iraq War I. The daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador, all dubbed up so you couldn't see her eyes, telling us she was a nurse from a Kuwaiti hospital and had witnessed Iraqis brutally throwing Kuwaiti babies out of incubators, unplugging the incubators and shipping them back home to Iraq. Even just 20, 30 years later, it seems almost impossible to believe that people believed that, but they did. I'm here to tell you. But war hoax propaganda has continued right up till this present day. Snake Island, Russian warship, go F yourself, the ghost of Kiev, the staged massacre of Bucha, the Russian attack by a missile on a railway station, which turned out to be a Ukrainian missile fired at that railway station, or at least hitting that railway station, even if by mistake. The old Kiev woman that poisoned 9 Russian officers by offering them pastries, which promptly killed them. All these war hoaxes we should have become used to. Believe nothing until it's been officially denied, and treat the output of the state you're in with all the respect it deserves, which is, of course, pretty close to zero. I'm one of those that believes that the Iraq War marked a turning point in Western society, but also across the world. People concluded that they would not fall for those lies again. Don't get fooled again. The old refrain from The Who began seriously to matter. That's not to say that there are not still people falling for war propaganda. Of course, millions do. But more people today don't than have ever in the course of human history. Our state has lost its credibility, and like virginity, you can't lose it twice. Once you've lost it, it's lost for good. I'll be back with a false flag report next week. There's some tasty false flags too, I can assure you. Now, the earlier guest, Professor Richard Wolff, said that there are mass shootings in the United States every other week. I didn't have the heart to tell him that, in fact, there are 1.63 mass shootings in the United States per day. Per day, 1.63 mass shootings. They're not all, of course, as utterly catastrophic as the one in the Ross Primary School near the border between Texas and Mexico. They are not all attended by a carnival of incompetence on the part of the law enforcement agencies, as is now tumbling out in the aftermath of this disaster. The cops waited for a skeleton key to open the classroom door whilst the children were being murdered inside. I'm sure I've seen American cops kicking down people's doors. I'm sure I've seen that before. They stood waiting for agonizing minute after minute after minute, waiting for the FBI to arrive in this rather remote place, rather than deal with the matter themselves. Apparently, there was a security guard with a gun who did fire a shot which bounced off the body armor that an 18-year-old was permitted perfectly legally to buy. Body armor and assault rifles, 2 of them, costing with ammunition more than $3,000. I, for one, would like to know how he was able to afford over $3,000 to buy these murderous weapons, which went on to kill, slaughter, actually, 19 children of the same age as my own, and 2 brave teachers slain with them. A lot of people in the US want to talk about it. Michael in Minneapolis is up first. What would you like to say, Michael?
Well, hello, George. I wanted to talk about, obviously, what you're talking about, the shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And I read a sobering stat that kind of puts it all into context. And that is that more children in the United States die of gunfire every year than all of the military personnel in the United States and the police combined. Combined. Children are the ones being slaughtered. It is now the #1 cause of death for children is gunfire. It used to always be car accidents. It has now become gunfire. I got to be honest, George, I'm really heated. I'm heated because we protested for 6 months solid, as you know, in 2020 to try to rein the police in and get them under control. And their budgets have only gone up since then. It's only expanded. And so much of these municipal budgets are buried in the police. Well, teachers go unpaid. And there are, during the pandemic, I can tell you, George, there are teachers who are covering multiple classes because they can't even get enough substitutes because they don't pay enough money to bring people into the teaching profession, and they're losing teachers every year. So these cops in Uvalde, Texas, show up, and they have, I've seen the picture of their SWAT team looking all cool, holding their AR-15s, feeling tough, and they sat there for an hour. And George, I'm not sure, I know you said that the shooter had body armor. I think that's been debunked. I'll have to double check, but I'm not sure he actually had body armor. And you described him as a security guard. No, that's the resource officer. That is a full-blown police officer. And their own, I've read their handbook, and it specifically says that the #1 priority is to stop the shooting as soon as you can and prevent more loss of life of innocence. And instead, these big, tough cops who walk around here's the contrast for me, is that inside, they're afraid to go inside. Some reports say they were standing just outside the window. Well, children are being executed, and they didn't even ask for a key to get through the locked door for an hour. They didn't even ask for a key to get through it because they were afraid to confront this shooter. All the while, kids are being massacred on the inside, and then on the outside, parents who want to rush in and help their children are being tasered, are being brought into custody, are being cursed out by the police and told they have no right to go in and try to save their children, and that the police refuse to do so either. I mean, if they're so afraid to confront a man with an AR-15, then maybe people shouldn't have AR-15s if they're that dangerous. And there's something that's changed in my lifetime, George. I remember when I was a little kid, they used to talk about the police in the context of, protect and serve the public. And now I know people who are police officers, and they say my #1 job is to get home to my family at night. It's like, no, your #1 job is to protect the public. That's what your #1 job is. And if you're not up for risking your life for that, then you're in the wrong profession. Period.
Well, it would be hard. I've lost Michael, but it would be hard to get a more powerful telephone call on a television program than the one you've just listened to. On the question of the body armor, I acknowledge that the information on that is contradictory. Some people say there was body armor, some people say there wasn't. Either way, this mass murderer could and should have been eliminated at a very much earlier point. Not that that is the fundamental answer when mass shootings are happening at the rate of 1.63 per day in the United States. And mass school shootings are, of course, occurring with monotonous regularity. The issue of what to do about guns and how the United States Constitution, which protects the right of the citizen to bear arms, how these two things are squared. Let's hear from Melvin in New York. Go ahead, Melvin.
Hi, George. You hear me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
On the same subject, all right, two questions, but on the same subject. I have recently done some research. Now, when I was younger, I was actually training to be a cop. And the guy's right. It was the motto to serve and protect the public. That was our motto. However, apparently in 2005, they changed the bill, and it went to the state Supreme Court, and I looked this up. You could Google this, okay? That apparently it is no longer the job of an officer to protect civilian lives. It's actually stated. I actually posted it to your Telegram. So if you are no longer allowed to, or if you are no longer obligated as an officer to actually do that, then why do we have cops in the first place? What are we paying taxes for to them? I completely agree with this 100%. The second thing, which is a question, and your people said I should still ask you, even though I confirmed it with them. Apparently, just so you know, you have people on Telegram saying that they're you and messaging people. I know this because I've had two people with an account saying that it's you messaging me, just so you are aware of that.
Yeah, on that latter point, I several times, every single day, send a message from me to everyone saying, I do not send direct messages. I will never direct message you. So anyone who claims to be me who's direct messaging you on Telegram is a fraud. I don't know quite what I can do. I've complained to Telegram multiple times. I think we've even got a pinned message on the masthead of our Telegram account. I do not send direct messages. So if you get one, it wasn't from me. Melvin, the much bigger point that you made is something that was echoed by Michael in Minneapolis, that the performance of law enforcement in the United States, always controversial, going back throughout my whole lifetime, has now become not controversial, but almost laughable, if it were not so tragic. It is risible that armed police officers stood outside a schoolroom whilst children were being murdered inside. It is beyond belief, it's beyond parody. And that they then had to belatedly ask for a skeleton key to get in the door, when they could have shot in the door, they could have smashed down the door. They heard gunfire inside the classroom. They might have been able to save the lives of these children. But we're still not getting to the big enchilada, which is, what do we do about a country which has constitutionally enshrined the right of its citizens to bear arms as a defense against government tyranny? You see, the United States was born a revolutionary country. It came to power through armed revolution. It knew very well to its cost what tyrannical government, in this case from London, looked and felt like, and was determined to guarantee to its citizens that they would at least be able to defend themselves. Now, that right to bear arms is sacred to millions of Americans who have lots of money and lots of guns and lots of political power. To paraphrase a now dead actor of the third rate, from my cold dead hand will you take my weapon. And the reality is, it's not going to happen in the US. They're not going to allow the state to disarm them. A new civil war would erupt if the state tried to do so. So, practical, not solutions, but practical reasons why the whole system of entry and exit from schools and the safety of the children in the schools is going to have to be the nuts and bolts, the ABC of this debate, unless anyone's going to say that the American people are going to disarm themselves. Last word from you, Melvin. Have I got that right?
You pretty much got that right, but I'd like to also add two things to that. One, like I said, I had training in my past, and all police officers have an automatic skeleton key in their trunk, or at least it used to be that way, which was a 12-gauge shotgun, which will open any lock, or almost every lock. Certain safes or something, no. So yes, they could have easily gone in there and not waited for the FBI. Second of all, I will also add this. As far as them being afraid of a 5.56, literally a varmint gun, a lot of people call it a assault rifle. That's only because of how it looks. It's literally a varmint gun. I can get the same model, same type of weapon in a wooden stock, semi-automatic firearm that is designed to literally shoot rabbits and deer, you know? So it's all the same with that. Our politicians don't know the difference between things, and they make things a little more scarier, which is why a lot of the kids these days, because they want the gun that looks like the military gun, even though it really isn't, which is the AR-15, they seem to go for that. And because it is so pronounced is why people grab that, which is actually, in a way, I hate to say it, but is actually a lucky thing, because the M1 Garand would be more devastating, or a 12-gauge. So for that, I'm kind of thankful. But at the same time, it's the politicized thing. You have people on Facebook and all over, and they're showing these weapons. And that is why people grab this. Personally, I wish they wouldn't grab any at all to do these things. But that is exactly why. Not because it does any more damage.
Melvin, thanks for your wisdom. Attila is in California. Let's hear from him. What would you like to say, Attila?
George, a couple of episodes ago, you were talking about Bernie Sanders, and you said he had clay feet. Well, let me ask you this. Well, I was fooled by him. I'm just going to say this. Do you think he was ever real, or was he always this human personification of a lawn chair that we have now?
I don't know. He fooled me for a time, Attila. You're in the US, you know him better than me, but from this distance, across an ocean, he looked to me like a ray of sunshine that might finally bring your country into the sunny uplands and give the rest of us a break. Whether he was always a varmint, always a blancmange, always a spineless amoeba, I don't know, but he sure is now.
He most certainly is now, and I'm becoming to believe he was always that way, that if he was elected, he would have done and I was for him, oh, believe me, I was one of the pros, man. I sent him $25. By the way, I sent you money too, but yeah, I hate to admit it, I got to up it to
Thank
you.
you.
Because, no, I got to up it to you because I'm sending him $10 more than you. But at any rate, he just does, he looks, that's my question. So I think that you answered me. I don't think he was ever real, and now he damn sure ain't real. And thank you for having me on. And
well, this is no, you're a gentleman. Thank you so much indeed, and for the donation too. I think this is the problem that was being alluded to by Professor Wolff, that there's no Bobby Kennedy in this picture. There's no Martin Luther King, there's no Malcolm X, there's no champions coming up the outside lane that one can spot and say, let's get behind them. Let's see if we can make the choice better than a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. There must be, right, a better choice available in a country of 350 million people.
But here's the thing, George. Anybody that's better than that, like Professor Wolff, has got enough sense not to run. I mean, Lord have mercy. I love the Wolf man.
Yeah, he doesn't run.
He's smart.
Yeah, the Wolf man is the real. He's the real deal. He's the real deal. Attila, thanks very much for that. William's in Montana, and he has a view on gun control which disagrees with mine. So his call is prioritized. William, what would you like to say? Go ahead.
I was making an ass out of myself and assuming I thought you would be strongly for any kind of draconian gun control here. But before I say, I'm glad that I talked to you before, and I'm glad to see you up, vim and vigor, and sounding good and looking good. And I'll say that first because the world needs you, man.
Thanks, brother.
I'm
not a pacifist or a liberal. If I had guns in the United States, I sure wouldn't let them take them away from me, because I know that would leave a lot of guns in the hands of people that would quite like to harm me. So it's a fool's errand to seek to disarm the United States. Am I right?
These guys won't follow any rules we put down, and there's always already something like 400 million guns in this country. You're not going to collect them all. You don't have any kind of firearm, George, at all?
Well, I might do, but I'd rather not say.
Okay, I was just wondering because you're there alone in the home sometime at night with the wife, the kids, and there's some bump in the night, and you feel better with everybody huddled behind a bunch of furniture, and you're there with a bead on the door. You know what I mean? And that's what a lot of people gun sales are through the roof here.
Yes,
they're through the roof because of that. Most people aren't buying AR-15s. And that guy before took a lot of the point I was going to make. They just look a certain way. They don't function a different way than a lot of others. But people are buying for self-defense. They don't trust law enforcement. They don't really trust the government. And they're kind of scared of their neighbors. So it's a bad time for people to be charging out with a campaign slogan about more gun control. I don't think it's really going to fly that well with the real the majority, because when you break it all down, everything that they line up that they want to do is either not going to do any good or would cause a civil war if they tried to do it. So
surely we can have background checks on people though, William. So many, the Buffalo shooter that killed all those shoppers, 10 shoppers, just the week before this latest atrocity. He made no secret of the kind of person he was. He wrote it on the proverbial subway walls. He wrote it on Facebook and on social media of all kinds. He was clearly an atrocity waiting to happen, and yet he was able legally to acquire guns. Surely people who are mentally deranged, unhinged, should not, without a background check, be able to pick up an assault rifle.
These guys didn't have background checks? I don't know. I haven't followed it.
No, there's no background checks.
No background checks.
No background checks in Texas, no.
I'm in Montana, which you'd think would be pretty wild and woolly. But you have a background check here. I mean, they run you through the system here. And I don't know, maybe Texas is... I thought Texas was actually a little more strict than we are here, but I'm not sure about that. But
perhaps originally, but quite recently, they junked background checks and moved to open carry.
Oh.
You can openly carry your weapon around in Texas.
Let me make one point about that, about the mental thing that's a problem that sticks out a little bit. I think we'd all agree that if somebody's kind of a nutter, as you call them, and it's seen, that there should be some way to restrict that sale and all this other stuff. But, sir, this is why the gun people kind of stiffen their backs. Because let's say that you had a whole bunch of things bad in your life that happened all at once. You have super anxiety. You go see a counselor. He puts you on an anxiety med for 6 months or something. And there it is on your record. And they say, well, this guy's got a history of mental illness, so we're denying his right. And that's what the gun people see. They see things like that. It's like the liability insurance. They see anything that's going to cost, and then that cost being able to be raised all the time to price them out of ownership. They see that too. Really looking to the camel's nose under the tent. They used to say, don't let the camel's nose under the tent. So, but you have the right idea.
That's a good one. Haven't heard that one.
Going to disarm us here.
I haven't heard that one before.
William,
thanks. Camels' noses in Montana. Who would have thunk it? Will background checks for guns be introduced in the US? That was our poll. Only 20% of you say yes on Twitter. 80% of you say no. On YouTube, 32% say yes. 68% say no. And on Telegram, 27% say yes. And 73% say no. You can still vote. The poll is still running. But I need a very quick break. 60 seconds. Count them.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You're being thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got that on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before. It was published. But actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
Global higher education with one of the world's best-known iconoclasts. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
That's the details for the Newcastle gig. What happens is I welcome you all. I sign books and copies, and we have a cup of tea together, and then we show the film, and then after it I do quite an extensive question and answer session. So it's at the Copthorne Hotel in Newcastle. So if you're anywhere in either the south southeast of Scotland or the northeast of England, make your way to Newcastle, which is a wonderful city, and the Copthorne, a wonderful hotel. It's on Monday, the 27th of June. Tickets still available. Thanks very much for that. Now, I had a very long involvement with South Africa. I had I would call it privilege of working under the leadership of the African National Congress, both here and abroad, and even in South Africa under apartheid. Not many people can say that. One day I'll tell all my stories about it. It is fair to say that there are many problems in South Africa, and this subject is not necessarily the one I want to deal with tonight. But in all the decades that I fought for the liberation of South Africa, the relationship between the liberation movement and Russia, Moscow, the then Soviet Union, literally could not have been closer. Every weapon, every bullet, every blanket, every medical facility, every trainer, every rest and recuperation period, every facility that was extended to the fighters against apartheid came from Russia and its allies. And it came as something of a surprise, to me at least, that the attitude of the African National Congress government was strangely muted when it came to the NATO proxy war being waged against Russia. It's not that South Africa under the ANC joined the sanctions or anything like that. They didn't. But they were scarcely enthusiastically defending or protecting the interests of a country that had done everything, literally everything, to ensure their success. And then I saw a member of parliament on the screen. I had never seen him before, and it turns out he's not even in the African National Congress. He's the leader of the National Freedom Party. His name is Shaik Emam. And so I asked if he'd come on the show, and he kindly agreed. Your Excellency, thank you for joining us. I saw you give a barnstorming parliamentary performance, trying to lay out the true facts of the Ukraine story. You seem to be getting barracked by one or two of your parliamentary colleagues, but you didn't let that put you off, as I wouldn't have myself. I can say it looked like one of my parliamentary speeches, and I fell in love with you right away and wanted to see you on the show. Tell us what it was you were saying in the parliament and why some people didn't seem to like it.
Well, first of all, very good evening to you from a beautiful but cold Cape Town, South Africa. Allow me, first of all, to thank you for your role in the liberation of the people of this country. Yes, indeed, you know, everything in the world revolves around politicians. Politicians use an opportunity to garner support, to become popular, and I think this was no different. And I must agree with you that it is indeed disappointing that the role that the Russian Republic and then, of course, the Soviet Union that played in the liberation of us South Africans and the ANC could only go on the mute. I must agree with you. Very little comments were coming, or they decided to take a neutral stance, and I felt it was not enough. Now, you must also agree with me that politicians, political parties, and governments all over the world are to some extent either funded or they are controlled by these superpowers or heroes, as they call themselves. And so South Africa is no different. in our politics as well. And that's why I've highlighted the issue of, if you talk about Palestine and many other countries, but if we talk about the issue of what's going on in the Russia-Ukraine one, all we were getting, and again I want to say that the media, the mainstream media worldwide, tells you what they want you to hear. And with the research that I did, I felt, no, I think it is only fair that we get the people to get a better understanding of what is actually going on in the Russian-Ukraine war. And that's why I chose to do what I did. And of course, there was opposition from some political parties. There's no doubt about it. I was expecting that. But that didn't deter me, because I had to do what I had to do. And, and not just only on the issue of the Russian-Ukrainian, like I've alluded to earlier on, but on many issues, we will not agree because, of course, we lack independence, we lack objectivity. And that's what gives rise to what I'm going to say next, that all the chaos in the world, the mayhem that you have, the division, all politicians are the root cause of it.
Well, I think there's quite a lot of people who will agree with that, Shaik. Let's stick for a moment, though, with the Russia-Ukraine issue. You see, I would have expected the government-controlled SABC to be expressing, if not nightly, then regularly, the kind of skepticism about the world narrative that you were left to do on the floor of the House. I would have expected a far more proactive stance coming out of Pretoria against NATO and its nefarious designs. I would have expected them to call a spade, and they really haven't done it. If they have done it, I didn't hear it, and if I didn't hear it, and I'm listening, then they must have said it very quietly. Why is that?
Let me agree with you. Very little is coming even from SABC or all the media houses in South Africa. And that gives rise to the question that you have an SABC, which is a government media house, forgetting the role that the Russians played in the liberation of the people of this country, knowing very well that the media, even in South Africa, has been captured, and for that reason you don't get independent or objective reporting. And we would have expected the SABC to do that, but clearly they did not, and they choose not to do that. But again, it simply means that the ANC government in the country has been giving instructions to the extent that they don't want to upset certain people all over the world in certain countries and certain superpowers. And you cannot, I want to say this again, you cannot continue wanting to be neutral, particularly when countries like Russia were there when you needed them most. You cannot do that. Now, we tend to lose our objectivity. It's because we are compromised. And that's the problem that the ANC finds itself in South Africa today.
Tell me, what is the National Freedom Party?
Well, first of all, the National Freedom Party is initially a breakaway from the Inkatha Freedom Party under my former leader, who died in September last year, Zanele Kamagwaza Msibi. I am the parliamentary leader for the National Freedom Party. And, so yes, we are one of 14 parties that are represented in the National Assembly.
So I read in the papers this week that the South African Communist Party, long a mainstay of the ANC, and COSATU, the main trade union federation, are making plans for the next election in anticipation that the ANC will lose the majority in the House. They will fall below 50% for the first time since liberation. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, you know, if you look at the state of the country, the state of the economy currently, and the direction we have been going in the last 28 years, in the interest of the broader community of South Africa, it would be a good thing. You know, I predicted many years ago that the ANC will be in power for 30 years, and I think I'm very close to that. It is very unfortunate that many of us that were part and parcel of the struggle, the vision that many of our leaders had previously, is not the vision that the current ANC has. As such, you would find that our state-owned entities or state-owned companies are beyond rehabilitation. You know, the levels, and I know that there's corruption all over the world, there's looting all over the world. We know this. But not in a new democracy like South Africa that's only 28 years old. But more importantly, if you look at the latest Zondo Commission that we've had and what it identified as the root causes, it calls the ANC as accused number one. And the president has admitted that. So, you know, in the interest of the country, it would be better if no political party has an absolute majority, because when you have an absolute majority, you tend to exploit that. And that is what is happening currently. But I want to say this, that all political parties in the country currently, wherever they govern, whether at local, provincial, or national level, have similar challenges on corruption, on looting, poor delivery of services, where you don't get value for money. We've introduced things like BEE. What has South Africa created in the last couple of years? 17,500 black millionaires and multi-millionaires out of the BEE. Has it benefited the 59 million people? No, it hasn't. So it means we need to go back to the drawing board, look at the policies that we have in place and whether it's worked. If it hasn't worked, it's time to change that. The problem we got is when you're not willing to admit that we've made mistakes so that we can correct them and find solutions. That's the problem we see. Then the bigger problem we got
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Right.
Go on.
Okay.
No,
Then
go
the
on.
other problem we got is every political party represented in the National Assembly is at each other's throats. It's not about the South African public. It's not about creating a better quality of life for our people. No. It's about attacking each one in order to score points and garner support and votes. That's what it is about. So what is the ANC doing? The ANC needs to protect its base. First of all political parties only employ people that are aligned or members of their party. That's the first problem you got. So even though the policy says something else, in practice, politicians decide who you employ in all spheres of government. And you only employ those people that are aligned to you. That is why you would see the Zondo Commission also identified one of the root causes of the collapse of the state-owned companies was the ANC Deployment Committee, which the current president, Ramaphosa, was the deputy president and responsible for, and has been appointing people on the boards of many of these state-owned companies that failed us. It's cadre deployment, and all political parties are doing the same thing. Now, political parties believe they can't align themselves or support any successes that you have as far as the ANC is concerned, because that's not going to give them the vote. So all they do is continuously attack the ANC. There has been some success, but very limited. And I've always said this, people don't judge you on what you have done. They judge you on what you could have done and what you have not done. And we could have done a lot more with the resources that we have available in the country. However, we have created, like I said, 17,500 millionaires and multimillionaires in this country currently. We remember that when, after 1994, South Africa was a very unequal society. 28 years later, it's more unequal now than it was then. The levels of poverty are greater now than it was then. So we have not taken advantage of even the infrastructure that existed to our advantage and built on that. I give you a good example. You cannot have economic growth in South Africa if you cannot have energy to supply these businesses and the households. Now, we knew we were going to have a problem. Did you concentrate on that one, on maintenance, and on the other one, to accommodate the growing population, which is growing by almost 1 million people every year? We have not been doing that. Now we find ourselves in a crisis. But what was more important, that when there was a handover from 1994, companies that were benefiting then, George, continue with those 30 and 40-year contracts, evergreen contracts, that's what I call them. They continue benefiting through those contracts up to today at exorbitant prices. So you're not getting value for money. That's the problem you got. So most of your money is not going into delivery of services. Okay? It's going into sustaining yourself, first of all, through your very high public service wage bill in the country and your administration. And this is why I say you don't need a 3-tier government. You need a 2-tier government, a national and a district level. We're now introducing a 4th-tier government at district level as well.
Okay, well, look, we'll pay far more attention to South Africa in the run-up to the elections. And thank you for your perspective on events. And thank you, above all, for that great speech you made in Parliament. Let me take 60 seconds, and then it's all calls all the way to the hour.
You know, and it's a very, thank you for, you know, I'm a big fan of your show, Gigi. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, you know. I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary McLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, you know, haggis, look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's hear from Chuck in San Diego. Who wouldn't want to be in San Diego on this fine May evening? Go ahead, Chuck.
Stellar lineup, George, as always. A point of clarification first. The Buffalo shooter was wearing body armor and was confronted by a security guard who was then shot and killed by the shooter. And the shooter was live streaming. The news now is not that the latest shooter was confronted by an officer, nor was he wearing body armor. The reason I called was the saying, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I was wondering, do Vietnam and Ukraine rhyme? In 1975, President Gerald Ford requested $772 million to go to support the regime in Saigon, and 2 weeks later, that regime fell. While we were in the United States in the midst of a gas crisis. Now, the United States is sending $40 billion to Ukraine to support them for the next 6 months, but we're not being told that it's not the last, it's just a down payment. It's not the last amount that we're going to have to spend.
Yeah, well, you won't lose it all, Chuck, because most of it is going not to Ukraine, but to the American military-industrial complex. It's billed as $42 billion of aid to Ukraine, but virtually no Ukrainian will ever get a sniff of a single one of those dollars. They are fattening the military-industrial complex in your country and one or two other satrapy countries. And you're right, it's not the final payment. And of course, much of it will have to be paid back by whatever Ukrainian state emerges from this disaster in the end. As I've said before, the United States government generously gave us a lot of aid in the Second World War, but not many people knew we were still paying it back until 2007. From 1940 till 2007, we were paying the US back for the Lend-Lease, which is the same basis on which they've given aid to Ukraine. I think that you've lost a lot of the material that's already gone in, and I think the war will be over before much of the rest is actually spent, because the military-industrial complex is having difficulty keeping up production levels given the vast amount of expenditure and the vast waste of the military hardware involved in this war. Much of it is sold. Some of it is on the dark web already, with criminal and terrorists and extremists buying it up. Some of it is destroyed on the way in, some of it is destroyed in the arms depots, and some of it is captured by the Russian forces as they win now victory after victory in the east of the country over a very dispirited, no wonder, dispirited, brave Ukrainian soldiers who have been effectively abandoned by Kiev. The president is more interested in being on screen in Cannes at the film festival, or at the Eurovision, or at the Oscars. The poor bloody infantry that the Ukrainians have sent, very large numbers of them to their death, the others living in complete terror under constant bombardment. I don't think this war will last all that much longer. Last word to you, Chuck.
Okay, yeah, one final word, George. There was a progressive rock group of English called King Crimson, and they had an album called In the Court of the Crimson King, and they had a song called Epitaph, and a line of that rings truer today than ever before. It goes, the fate of all mankind, I fear, is in the hands of fools. And that's exactly where the world is today. Thanks as always,
well,
George.
It's a school day every day. Every day is a school day. Chuck in San Diego just schooled us on a few things there. And that quote from King Crimson is a very powerful and profound one indeed. Let's go from California to Florida, where Elliot has a view on the Uvalde massacre. Elliot, what would you like to say?
Well, thank you, George. First of all, it's always an honor to talk to you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of points about the Uvalde. First, just to some of the details which have outraged not only myself, so many people have become outraged that when they saw the timeline that was posted by the news, some of the news agencies, the timeline of 911 emergency calls that were being made by the 10-year-old students in the classroom while the police were standing outside for an hour. And the timeline of this one girl calling 911 saying, please send the police. And then that young girl was killed, and another young person took over and was calling while the police were standing outside. It's an outrage. It's a complete outrage, and it was due to the decision apparently by the commanding officer. He said, "Well, you know, he's barricaded in there. Let's let it go." Yeah, it's just an outrage. But
who's going to pay? Who's going to be made? Who's going to be made accountable for all these blunders, Elliot? I mean, in a sane world, the entire political leadership in that part of the state, if not the state itself, would have to resign. Their subordinates have been guilty of grotesque incompetence and negligence.
Oh, completely. And you put in a sane world. Do you remember Greg Palast, the investigative journalist, about a dozen or so years ago, put out a book called Armed Madhouse, which is exactly what we have. I believe the United States as a society has been going completely mad for at least a dozen years, and that we are arming ourselves to the teeth. We are an armed madhouse, and the structures have completely broken down into insanity, is what I believe, and it's terrifying. It's really frightening.
Well, imagine what that says for the European political leaders that continue to take orders from the leaders of an armed madhouse. That makes us the maddest of all. Thanks for that call, Elliot. Brilliant. Eve is in Idaho, always worth hearing. What would you like to say, Eve?
Hello, George. Well, I wanted to say that there is something very scary about the war in Ukraine, and this is the following. The war in Donbass is almost finished, and you would assume that, I'm going to assume that the people in charge of the war on the Ukrainian side are. So instead of pulling out their soldiers and put them in a better place, they'll leave them there, telling me that they want to buy some time. And I'm afraid that the time they want to buy is to involve Poland into the conflict. And I have two clues for that. The first clue is the change of laws that they made, that a Polish person can become a judge in Ukraine. It's something which looks like merging the two countries, and it's something who would void the Article 5 of NATO. And the second thing is the fact that NATO is going to send Ukraine long-range rocket, which could reach, let's say, Russia way beyond the border. So let's suppose that they send a rocket which reaches Russia 200 miles from the border. What is Putin going to say? He's going to say, well, you reach me 200 miles within my border, I'm going to reach you 200 miles within your border, which again put Poland into the fight. And this is what NATO wants. They want to make the fight wider because they know they cannot win it with Ukraine alone. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, they're powerful, although what I know of the Polish armed forces, that would not make much material difference on the battlefield. But there's obviously a great deal going on the Polish front. The Belarusian state said that Polish forces were poised to push into the country. Poland has historic claims on parts of Western Ukraine. And I've no doubt they would like their territory back. They would certainly like their soft power and cultural power in the western part of Ukraine back. As I believe that Ukraine will be two separate states quite soon, then I think it makes sense for Ukraine to some extent, merge itself with Poland. I myself do not regard that as necessarily a bad thing. And because the Western Ukrainian entity that will survive this war, unless, of course, it continues so long that they begin to lose ground even in the west of the Dnieper River, is so weak and small and impoverished that it's like Kosovo. It would have no independent economic sense about it at all. It would be landlocked. It's the vast bulk of its agricultural treasures would be gone in the east. The industry was already almost all in the east. So some kind of redrawing of borders may very well be on the agenda behind the scenes. Eve, thanks as always for your wisdom. The numbers again in the UK 08081965522 and in the US +1 844 944 3344. Now in the last hour we have some treats for you, particularly Lee Camp on the shootings in America and James Giles, newly elected as a councillor, on British political developments. And we'll be catching up on Gayatri, who's been doing a roundup of the comments from you tonight on social media. And at the beginning of the first hour, if not now, right now, you can see the second part of my little documentary on John Charteris, the father of the war propaganda hoax. Take a look. You've almost certainly never been in Tynwald, and there's a pretty good chance you've never heard of Sir John Charteris. But here lies the father of the modern war atrocity propaganda. Sir John, who's buried here in rural Dumfriesshire, a tiny hamlet in thankfully remote southwest Scotland, not far from where we live, was laid to rest here at the time that he was the Member of Parliament for Dumfriesshire, referred to as the Unionist Member of Parliament, which at that time was a synonym for Conservative. He was an undistinguished Member of Parliament, so far as I can tell. Certainly history does not contain much of a footprint of Sir John, but he does have an important place in history. As an army officer, he was taken under the wing of Lord Kitchener, who died whilst the Commander-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces during the First World War. So impressed was Kitchener by Sir John Charteris, he made him the head of a newly founded British military intelligence. Between 1915 and 1918, Sir John was in charge of finding out just what the fiendish Hun was up to and trying to counter any intelligence of their own. But during that period, Sir John Charteris came up with a story about a flesh rendering factory in Germany that, in order to counter the shortage of fats as a result of the British naval blockade of Germany, he said that there was a factory in Germany into which corpses were fed for rendering, and that this led to all kinds of products, including, amazingly, lampshades being made from the fats of the corpses, Allied as well as German, presumably, that were being fed into the rendering equipment. I myself, in the 1950s or early 60s, that's a long time after the First World War, was frequently regaled by stories that the Germans, as well as raping nuns in Belgium and bayoneting priests, were feeding corpses into machines and turning them into lampshades and soap, amongst other products. This aroused the conscience in America and across Europe, across the world. Indeed, Sir John's primary goal was to bring China into the First World War against Germany. The problem was, it was all a lie. Many years after the First World War, Sir John Charteris, Member of Parliament, admitted that he had invented the entire story. So I've no doubt there was atrocity war propaganda in the past, but here in this churchyard in Tynwald, we can see the last resting place of the man who gave birth to the modern version of atrocity war propaganda. This war propaganda lasted, of course, throughout the Second World War and gave birth to many similar atrocity stories that were complete hoaxes, right up until the present time. The war against Iraq over the invasion of Kuwait, for example, 30 years ago, was kicked off, at least for Americans, by the absolutely fake story that Iraqi soldiers had been taking Kuwaiti babies out of incubators, throwing them on the floor, unplugging the incubators, and shipping them back to Iraq. This story was told to the US Congress, tearfully, by a nurse who had personally witnessed it. She was helpfully burqa'd up, her face covered. No one could tell who she was. When it turned out that she was, in fact, the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to Washington, it was all too late. A lavishly funded public relations company called Hill and Knowlton had invented the entire story. And there have been too many to mention. When I'm back in the studio, I'll give you more examples of how war propaganda, entirely invented, has fueled many modern wars, including today in Ukraine. All credit to my good wife who filmed and engineered that whole thing. Thank you, Gayatri, for that. And thank you to Liz Hill, who has donated $100 to the Fighting Fund to bring back the midweek MOATS Extra. Thank you, Liz. And No Mayor One has given £20 and makes the point that all air ambulance services depend on charities in the UK. The waiting time in NHS hospital emergencies is 4 hours. All social spending is cut due to budget cuts. How can we control public spending? Thank you for that. Now, Lee Camp is not only one of the best comedians and comic writers in the United States, he comes from a tradition of people who kick over the traces, kick over the apple cart, who question the authority. He punches up, not down. He questions the official narrative and makes people laugh with his questions. That makes him a very dangerous enemy of the state. And so he had a show called Lee Camp Redacted, which is no longer, although he'll tell us, no doubt, where we can catch up on his work, because he's on the show now. Not redacted here, it's the one and only Lee Camp. Lee, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let's start with that. What are you doing now?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I am now, I believe, the most censored comedian in America. As you're referencing, the TV show Gone and all of the back videos, about 1,000 of them all banned on YouTube globally, and my podcast, Moment of Clarity, deleted by Spotify, all in the span of about 3 days. I am building something new, and if people want to support it, it's at leecamp.net. I also am excited to be starting a new show, hopefully soon, with Mint Press, if that fundraiser is successful. So Mint Press News does wonderful work as well.
It does, but how do we account for the fact that you're the most censored comedian in America? How did that happen? Did you ever see yourself as likely to be given such accolades?
No, I definitely did not. And it's funny because we're having this big debate around the globe about cancel culture and comedians being canceled and things like that. And yet everyone they mention on the list of those who are being canceled, Dave Chappelle, Ricky Gervais, Joe Rogan, none of them have actually been canceled. They are all on the largest video and sound platforms in the world, getting paid $100 million or more. So it is laughable that those are our examples of canceled comedians, while in fact, the likes of me is actually canceled, actually deleted, and actually censored. And you ask why? It's because, like you said, I actually punch up. I actually punch at the ruling elite and go after these parasites, these vampires that are controlling the foreign policy and, of course, the domestic policy as well of America, my home country, and a lot of countries. But, you know, I go after them. I go after those who will perpetrate endless war, who will perpetrate endless imperialism, and have this capitalist system that puts profit over all else. And that will actually get you canceled in a real way, as opposed to the laughable, you know, people claiming they've been canceled because someone got upset on Twitter.
Well, that's a very powerful description of where we're at. Let's turn to the very, very somber issues that are, frankly, bringing your country, which I love, to its knees. The economic crisis is accompanied, paralleled by social division, racial division, the rise of hatred, and the increasingly unhinged behavior of individuals, either in the pursuit of political goals, like the mass murderer in Buffalo, or for reasons that they're simply mentally have gone mad, in the case of the Uvalde school shooting. What on earth is happening to America, and what can be done to save it?
Well, I think on the surface level, you have the gun debate, which I think is a worthwhile debate to have. Our politicians have all been bought off by big industry of one form or another, so they seem completely powerless to do anything, or they are completely spineless. I don't want to act like they're powerless. They're just spineless. But the gun debate also is... We put it in a binary. Everyone likes to put it into a binary. We love a good binary in America, Democrats or Republicans, war or peace, hot or not. We love a binary, and people put the gun debate into a binary of all guns or no guns, when in fact, the truth is, most everyone I've ever spoken to believes in some form of weapon control. I've never met a human who thinks we should all have nukes or should be able to sarin gas a whole town because we get angry one day. So in that respect, if we all agree we believe in some sort of weapon control, then you're just deciding where on the scale that needle should be. And assault weapons, being able to take out 50 people in a minute, is just pure insanity. And that people don't want to actually have the real debate. But you get below as you referenced, you get below the gun debate, and it's much deeper than that. America has become a powder keg. People have just been exploited by corporate industry to the nth degree. People worry that with the loss of one job or one shift, they won't be able to feed their kids. They can't afford the insane health care, which is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. And when you have that kind of powder keg and you have these kind of weapons, this is how it ends up in really just disgusting, horrific scenes.
They're everyday scenes. As I pointed out earlier, there are 1.63 mass shootings in America per day. Of course, they don't all make the news. They're not all on the scale of the horror that took place in Texas. Did that move the needle at all in terms of what politicians might be likely to do, or is it thoughts and prayers again?
I have no hope that our politicians will ever do the right thing. They have never shown to me that they are willing to put their political life on the line and actually stand up for what's right. That is not how our government has been fully and completely bought. And every time there's one of these horrific mass shootings, everyone does the thoughts and prayers thing. We have semi-automatic thoughts and prayers all over the country, and it does absolutely nothing, even though they act like it will. It never changes anything. And it's, I always point back to the 2014 Princeton study that showed that if something does not align with corporate interests, it has zero chance of ever getting through Congress. Zero. There is never a moment where a anti-corporate bill of any kind goes through our Congress. And, corporate interests are not aligned with doing anything about gun control, with doing anything about the killing or the underlying causes of all of this madness. And so I have no hope that anything will change in our government.
What about the argument, and I've been having it with some earlier this evening, that your Constitution enshrines the right of the citizenry to bear arms, and that's a good thing, that tyranny is always possible, maybe even more than possible in some countries, including your own. And that the citizens will never allow themselves to be disarmed. Therefore, making it a binary of guns or no guns is almost the very definition of futility. The question is where you draw that line and whether you background check people. And if you did, many of these shooters, the one in Buffalo is a case in point. He plastered all over every wall he could find the kind of insane hatred that he harbored. And yet he was legally able to own a gun. Surely we should be concentrating on these, if you like, details, rather than the binary guns or no guns.
Yeah, I agree. I'm actually not opposed. I mean, I'm not for banning all guns in America, both because, as you say, you can end up in a tyranny situation, but also because it's just never going to happen in the United States. It's not how the mentality of our culture. And so I believe the honest debate is just on the size and deadliness of the guns. And having guns that are purely designed to kill as many people as possible would never be used in hunting or anything like that, would never be used to defend yourself against, one burglar or something, unless you're trying to spray them with 50 bullets. Those guns are insane. There's no reason that anyone should have them on that level. But in terms of the Constitution, the truth is the Constitution says you have a right to bear arms in a well-regulated militia, which, of course, we've thrown the second part of the sentence out of the window. No one pays any attention to a well-regulated militia anymore. And, on top of it, we've found every loophole there is. We act like the Constitution is a holy document when, in fact, it's a loopholey document. And we find every excuse there is to get around and inside everything in the Constitution we want to. I mean, the Declaration of Independence said all men are created equal. And at the time, they meant 6% of the population. All men meant all white land-owning males, 6% of the population. So they didn't mean listen to this by the word. And I think that the idea that it means that, because we have a right to bear arms, it means you can have weapons of war that could kill dozens of people in seconds is just idiocy.
And what about the Keystone Cops, Lee? I've never seen a policing performance from all the details that are now emerging. And yet no one seems to pay the price. That grown men, heavily armed grown men, stood outside a classroom while children were being murdered for an entire hour before fetching a skeleton key to allow them to open the door like they've never kicked a door in before.
Yeah, and on top of that, apparently they told the border agents that ultimately were the ones who went in and killed the man. They told them to stay out for a half an hour until those agents decided they weren't going to wait anymore, and they went in. I think what it shows at the heart of it, in my opinion, and maybe the story will get more complicated, but it shows that the police in America, which is one of the largest police forces in the world, to defend one of the largest, the largest prison state in the world, the police are not there to actually defend us. 99.9% of what they do is just arrest people, mainly poor people, mainly people of color, and make sure that they're put into the system, put into the prisons, so that we can continue to have the largest prison state in the world, both per capita and per sheer numbers. That's their main job. And to protect the fascist state if the need should arise. Their job, when it comes down to it, is not to run in and try and take on a gunman who's killing children. And we saw that in this instance, that when push comes to shove, they're like, I'm not risking my life to go take this man down. My job is to harangue people who are in poorer communities.
It's a tragic, and it would be comic if it were not so tragic, indeed. Thanks, Lee. I hope everyone will follow you. LeeCamp.net, I think you said.
That's right. If I can get enough members there, I will be restarting a new show.
Well, you've got me for starters. Lee Camp, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. And the book I told you about earlier, apparently there's a graphic. It's a really good offer. You get 2 novels by me, dedicated and signed for £8.99. And I've got to say, I really think that they're worthwhile. The counterfactual thesis is that Hitler made it across the channel. And Mr. Churchill's pledge that we would fight them and never surrender was put to the test. Some passed that test, including him, but some failed it very spectacularly indeed. I honestly think you'll like it. So it's Queensway and Blacklake together for £8.99 plus postage. I think you'll like it, but then I wrote it. Let's go to calls. Federico is in Canada. Go ahead, Federico.
Hey, George, nice to talk to you. Thanks for receiving my phone call.
Welcome. Go on.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Lee Camp. I wanted to add something politically that has to do with the world. Colombia, right now, as we speak in your program, is having elections. Colombia is the biggest producer of cocaine in the world. Whether we like it or not, one of the biggest commodities, quote unquote, that are expensive. People consume cocaine. The UK Parliament have been under the influence of cocaine, which has been hush-hush over the years. When I hear Lee Camp speaking in your program, I totally agree. What happened with the massacres, George, is, of course, despicable. I mean, what's going on? But in Colombia, when massacres are produced by the state, it's a different tale. It's not a tale, it's history. This day, today, President of Colombia, the candidates are 4. Petro has been attempted to be killed. The vice president formula is a black woman who has been exploited over the years, since 1492. There's much to talk about this. So, when I hear Lee Camp speaking about the massacres that happen, and I pray for the souls of the kids and their families, of course, I'm a Catholic, but when it happens for a state, within the state, for more than 62 years, and the peace process has been broken by the government, today's elections are related to what Lee Camp was saying. I would like to know your opinion and the influence of North America now that is losing ground in Europe with this war in Ukraine. What will be the approach, George? I would like to ask you. In South America, Brazil, especially Colombia, which is borders with Venezuela. Thanks, George.
Well, the attempt to roll back the tide in Latin America by the US has failed. Cuba is still standing, Venezuela is still standing, and the sulfur was detectable again when the Americans came back cap in hand, asking for Venezuelan assistance to up the production of oil. The result in Chile, the upcoming result in Brazil, perhaps most importantly of all, the result in Mexico with AMLO, the result in Argentina, the tide that the US thought they had turned back has indeed come in again. And I fully expect the left-wing candidate to win the presidential elections in Colombia. And then the question will be, what will the United States' approach be to yet another victory in a country which for so long has been their plaything and which has been responsible, as you say, for much misery, not just in Colombia, but throughout the region and throughout the world, namely the narco kings and the narco politicians that have ruled the roost in Colombia for so long. So I pray for the victory of the socialist candidate there this evening, and I will do anything I can. It will be small, but anything I can to build solidarity with Colombia in those circumstances. Thanks, Federico, for the call. We'll go to California for a view on Ukraine from David. Go ahead, David. What would you want to say?
How you doing, George? You're my hero, man. Hey, okay, now I'm going to speak from actually two perspectives, a black's perspective and a Hispanic perspective here in California, or at least most of the United States, I would think. Now, why throughout history that I know of, Russians have always been treated like the N-word. I mean, all throughout.
Yeah, it's very strange. Yeah, it's very strange. It didn't matter that communism collapsed, that the Soviet Union broke up, that Russia freely evacuated and gave up control over hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of what had once been a country governed from Moscow. It didn't matter that they adopted capitalism. It didn't matter that they brought back the church. It didn't matter that they had free elections. It didn't matter that the leading politicians are all practicing Christians. None of that mattered. The hatred against Russia never changed. You ask me for the reason, I actually don't know it. I don't know it, David. I don't know why.
Well, maybe we need to look inside ourselves for that one. Oh.
Maybe so. Maybe. Go on. Last word to you.
Yeah. Namu Kintu, African phrase for a word of man controls the land. I'm going to sign out on that one, okay?
Good man. Good sign out. Thanks very much indeed. 60 seconds while I drink my tea, and then it's the one and only James Giles.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, the second poll is running, big time actually. Who do you believe in the Depp Heard Hollywood libel trial? A, Johnny Depp, 74% on Twitter. B, Amber Heard, 4%. C, neither, 22%. Bad luck, Amber Heard. On YouTube, it is Depp 64, Heard 3%, neither 33%. And on Telegram, the worst of all, it's Depp 64%, Heard 2%, neither 34%. You can vote right up to the end of the show. Why don't you? And James Giles is well known to regular viewers of the show. But you knew him when he was a boy. Now he's the youngest councillor in the country. And he's even more wise than he was before. And he joins me now, as he will regularly, to review the British political scene. James, many congratulations from all of us at the mother of all talk shows. It was a splendid council victory. And I know that you'll go on to greater and greater things. But how do you see the current political juncture in which we have, in my view, the worst government that we have ever had and the worst opposition that we have ever had, both sitting in Parliament at the same time? And the third wheel, the Liberal Democrats, are perhaps the most pitiful of all. How did we get here?
Well, it's a very strange situation, isn't it, George, where we have a Prime Minister that is being referred to the Privileges Committee for misleading the House. We have a Labour Party where the RMT unions say that the leader isn't representing working people. I mean, the Labour Party not representing working people. It's just staggering, isn't it? And we've got the Liberal Democrats sort of teetering along there in third place with just over a dozen MPs to their name, not really making any meaningful difference or contribution to the House of Commons. I think the political situation in this country has never been more dire. I think one of the first times we met, you used the phrase, if I may say, two cheeks of the same backside. But never has it been more appropriate to use that term than it is today. It's absolutely insane. You've got a Prime Minister that's limping on. 34 Tory MPs now publicly have questioned Boris Johnson's position. And it's a very odd situation. Although the one thing I will say to the Liberal Democrats is that they have been incredibly lucky these past few months in the by-elections that have come up due to Tory scandals. Tiverton and Honiton, which is going to the polls in a few weeks' time, they may even cause a third upset in a row there after Chesham and Amersham and North Shropshire. And that, I personally think, might be the final nail in Boris Johnson's coffin. So we're at a very odd time politically at the moment. I think we're in a bit of a void. But it's looking like, Boris may well now finally be on his way out. And then politics might just get moving again. It'll either get better or it'll get worse. We'll have to wait and see.
It's jolly bad luck that just when we needed the best men and women and measures, that we've got the worst men and women. I'm thinking Liz Truss here subconsciously. And measures which are... well, how shall I put it? Bread and circuses. Talking of measures, we've got the Queen's crown back on the pint glass. That won't put, of course, any potatoes on the plate. It won't fill anybody's car. And for those that can't even afford to go out for a drink, they'll never see the crown. It's jolly bad luck for us, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, this announcement about imperial measures coming back, Boris Johnson wheeled this pledge out in 2019 in the general election, when it was looking as though Farage's Brexit party might have had a real impact before they chose to stand down their seats. It's an announcement that seems to come earlier and earlier every year. It gets wheeled out whenever the Conservatives are in trouble. The flag-waving patriots of a certain age say, yeah, I remember how it was back in my day before the metric system. And of course, nothing ever happens. But let's say this time it does. As you say, what does that mean to an ordinary working person? It means absolutely nothing. We've had another mini budget from Rishi Sunak this week, unveiling a further £15 billion of support, dancing in a way to Labour's tune, actually. Very unusually, they've spent weeks, months, the Conservatives, saying they were against a windfall tax on energy companies, on their profits. And of course, they've now done a complete about turn and a steamrolling ahead with that, although they can't quite bring themselves to use that phrase. Now, that obviously will provide some support to those who need it, but it'll also provide support to people who don't. A large amount of the money that's been allocated will go to people that own second homes, third homes, the ultra rich. And what the government are doing, in my view at least, isn't sufficiently targeting those funds to the people who need it most, to those who can afford to go out, enjoy meals, enjoy luxuries. I was about to use the phrase shop at Waitrose, but I appreciate many of your viewers may not realise what that term means. But to those who can afford the luxuries in life, they'll also be getting at least £400 of support from the government, which is, no mean discount when in the grand scheme of things.
Quite so. Now, going back to Boris Johnson's problems in Parliament, it was thought, including by me, that he was out of the woods so far as no confidence vote was concerned. But he seems to have slipped back into trouble over that. And as you say, 34 people have either put letters of no confidence in or have publicly stated that they feel he should go. How many of such people does there need to be? And what would it take, do you think? Mrs. Thatcher obviously stood down and she won a ballot. She just didn't win it by enough. Would Boris Johnson take a different line? Would he not care if he got through a vote of confidence, even by one vote? He'd carry on and on and on.
Well, prime ministers, of course, once you've reached the highest office in the land, it would take a lot for someone to choose to go. I mean, in Mrs. Thatcher's case, of course, she was fatally wounded, at least politically speaking, but one would have to be dragged, typically kicking and screaming, from Downing Street. There obviously is no higher office. Yes, as you say, 34 MPs have publicly questioned the prime minister's position. I would caveat that of those, a number have said now isn't the right time for Boris to go. Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, being one such person, saying Boris needs to go, but not until after the Ukrainian situation has passed. 24 Tory MPs, though, have publicly called on Boris to go, including some really senior figures. Sir Roger Gale, first elected in 1983, calling upon him to go for misleading the House. I mean, Roger Gale is a stickler for the rules and how things should be. A number of newer MPs as well, Anne-Marie Morris saying it's insulting. It's up 9, I think, crucially, publicly at least, since the Sue Gray report. And it's important probably for your viewers and listeners to be aware that obviously Tory MPs don't have to publicly state they're putting in a letter. It is a secret letter. So the magic number is 54. We're up to 24 that we know have submitted full-on letters. And there's over 350 Conservative MPs. And my question is, well, where are the other people living? Are they on cloud cuckoo land? I mean, it should only take for someone with an ounce of intelligence, dare I use the imperial measure, to realise that from a Conservative point of view, Boris Johnson is not the man to lead them into the next election, is not the man to get the country through this crisis. They would have to have less than an ounce of intelligence not to realise that this is surely the case, and that for the sake of their own party, yet alone the country, you need to rip the Band-Aid off and actually say it's time for a new leader. Who that'd be, of course, is another question. But Boris, I think, really...
Well, it's a big question, though, isn't it? It's a big question, though, isn't it? Because Boris Johnson undoubtedly won votes for the Conservatives that no other Conservative leader could have won. He did it when he won twice the mayoralty of London, an overwhelmingly Labour city, and he did it in the general election 2019, winning seats in places that had never before in history voted for the Conservatives. So knock him out and put in who exactly?
Well, that is the big question. I think Rishi Sunak will be hoping that his package of, in effect, mass handouts will win him back some favour. He had, of course, been the runaway favourite to succeed Boris Johnson, earning the name Dishy Rishi in the press. But his own tax affairs having been made public, his wife having non-dom status and not paying tax in this country, really, I think, has affected his chances. Priti Patel clearly fancies herself for the job, but I think will just be utterly toxic. And even, I think, diehard Conservatives realise that she's not the lady to take us forward. She's not the new Iron Lady, and I don't think she ever will be. Which, of course, leaves us with the third sort of front-runner, which is Liz Truss, who's the Foreign Secretary. Now, Liz originally, I think, kicked off a bit too soon when the furore around Partygate first started up. Liz Truss was holding events called Fizz with Liz with Tory backbenchers and perhaps being a little bit too open and candid about her clear ambition to become the next leader of the Conservatives and the next Prime Minister. She models herself as the next Mrs. Thatcher, the new Iron Lady, replicating some of Mrs. Thatcher's most famous sort of photo shoots in the press. And so Liz Truss is well regarded, I think, amongst the Conservative membership. She's done, by Conservative standards, a not bad job as Foreign Secretary, negotiating trade deals and what have you. And so if I were a betting man, I'd be putting my money at the moment on Liz Truss, but it's a very volatile situation.
Well, I am. Yeah, indeed. I am a betting man, and my money's on a complete outsider, 40-1. Her name is Penny Mordaunt. Don't forget her, because if she wins, I'm retiring. I'll make a very, very handsome package of money in golden guineas. James Giles, wonderful to have you back on the show. I hope that we can make it regular. Thank you indeed. Let's go to the calls. Line 1. E is in New York on why the West hates Russia. Go ahead, E.
Mr. Galloway.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say there's a very interesting paper by Webster Tarpley titled British Coup d'etat in Washington about how the Harriman gang started the Cold War. Before he lost his mind over Russiagate, he made some very salient points in this article. And basically, the imperialists in the CIA and when Roosevelt died, people who took over, they became very concerned that Russia, then the USSR, was going to establish footholds in nations, and the more footholds they establish, the weaker the U.S. and our British partner would become. So they went out of their way to basically make an enemy out of the USSR because they looked at it as the main impediment to their world domination. And, when Roosevelt was alive, he considered the tripartite between the U.S., the USSR, and the British to be what's going to maintain the world order, right, and keep out fascism. And they couldn't wait for him to die. And according to this paper, which was very well written, I'm in alignment with that paper because everything that paper lays out happened. And you could see the results, 800 plus military bases, wars, the war economy never ending, and the hegemony. And now Europe and the UK, it's like a colony of the United Snakes of America. So I just wanted to give my perspective and say thanks to you.
And you did very powerfully, and we'll all be looking for that paper now because Tarpley's writing is important and we'll all have to search for it. Thanks very much for that kind steer in that direction. Of course, I know the origin of and the longevity of anti-Soviet hysteria in the West. I just argued and thought, sincerely believed, that with the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of its existential threat to the Western capitalist imperialist order, that the sensible thing to do, if I had been a member of the ruling class, would have been to embrace Russia and absorb it fully into all of the architecture, the EU, NATO, all the international fora and so on, because look, Russia is a capitalist country. It is a European capitalist country. If you want to get down and dirty, it's a white, overwhelmingly white European capitalist country. The very kind of country you'd think these oligarchs would quite like to have on their side. But they have fashioned a situation where Russia and China are now effectively one country, and the division between East and West will never be healed. Kipling will finally be right. The East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. That still puzzles me as to why that kind of approach wasn't taken by the rulers of the empire. Now, my good wife awaits in another part of the house. We're going to speak to each other by camera. It's a modern marriage. Gayatri, welcome. Wonderful to see you again. I do hope I get to see you later. Tell us what's rattling on the social media front.
Well, I want to make a report on the first poll, which did very well and triggered a lot of response, a wide range of support. Response. Even though the
Put your mic on. Is your mic on? Don't worry, put it on. Can you do it without embarrassment? That's better. It's better already.
Good.
It's all right. Say all that again.
I was saying, the first poll triggered a wide range of commentary, even though the result is 80 to 20 saying no, answering no. The reasons for it is very different. And Pat Brannigan says, Americans are at war with each other. Over 215 mass shootings in the US in 2022 already. About 30 of them in school shootings. We don't need a war with another country. We do it well against each other. And Marcus says, school shootings were unheard of before the 70s, yet guns have always been available in the US. What's happening to the mental health of young people in the US? Big Pharma and their psychoactive drugs. And Mario Cardoso says, Trump's America is going to leave the Russians alone, but will go to direct war with China. And this is a fun one, which I want to read from Richie Burke. He says, guaranteed to tell the truth, 1, drunks, 2, children, 3, leggings, and 4, George Galloway.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Cut that out and keep it. The leggings is a bit cruel, but true. Very good.
Then Tommy Ryan says, George Galloway is the only encyclopedia you will ever need. Get yourself educated by listening to Gigi and his guests. And we had excellent ones tonight.
And our callers, by the way. I mean, we've not just got the best host, the best guests, We've even got the best callers. The level of erudition and eloquence of our callers, which are entirely random, is of university standard, University of the Airwaves standard. And I'm really proud of the whole shebang. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yes, proud we are indeed. Tony says the pro-Ukrainian propaganda network are suddenly going very quiet about Ukraine winning the war. Now they are admitting Russia has serious momentum. Absolute clowns, he says. And Sofia Melikova says, here in the UK, we don't have weapons, therefore no mass shootings of the children. But on the other hand, we have postcode/area gangs where children are getting killed and stabbed. And yeah, unfortunately true. Mike Rangel says, only after the white man chops down the last tree will he realize you can't eat money. Which reminds me of the song in the beautiful Pocahontas movie, which our daughter really likes to sing.
Indeed, and it does indeed. In fact, that saying is, I think it's longer. It's only when the last fish and the last river and the last tree and so on. And of course it is absolutely true, and it is an original American saying from the Native American people. Tell me, where are most communications coming in on? Are they coming on Twitter or on YouTube comments or Facebook comments?
Everywhere. It's YouTube, it's Twitter, it's the Telegram, your Telegram group, it's the email, and it's Rumble. People are commenting on Rumble as well. It's truly on all platforms, and it's truly from all over the world. All over the world.
Well, save them for our bedtime reading just before we watch Couples Come Down With Me, which is our nightly routine. Thank you very much for that. I'm sorry the hour does not allow too many more comments, unless you've got a standout one there that you wanted to say. No, she's gone. I hope she's not angry with me. No, she's still there. Did you have a standout one that I was cutting you off from saying?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, remember, please donate on Super Chat to the Fighting Fund. We want to get the podcast back. We want to get the midweek show back. Any currency, just £5 or $5. Why don't you? Go to Super Chat on YouTube. Use the slider on the right-hand side of the YouTube stream and pledge just a few coins. Or go to moats.tv/donate. So moats.tv and go to the donate section on the website. Only time for a few more calls, but I want to get them in. Wayne is in Cheshire in England on Boris and on inflation. Let's hear Wayne. What would you like to say, Wayne?
It was a pleasure. I have a theory on the Boris wanting to go back to the imperial system because Tories never miss a trick. Number one, all the packaging will have to be relabeled, and I also believe they will mess with the measurements of petrol, gas, commodities, etc. And what will happen is, example being, when you go in the supermarket and talk to someone next to you and say, oh, well, this time last year, this was 50 pence, now it's £1. There'll be none of that because we won't be able to compare of what the old prices were with the rampant inflation. But the other thing, which I think the main reason is, which no one's thought about, is all the contracts will have to be rewritten. And within these massive contracts of food and commodities, I also believe that the Tories will take a place within the contracts. So if the prices of commodities get too high, they can interfere and hopefully keep them at a level that people will be able to live.
Well, that's a fascinating theory. Some might call it a conspiracy theory, but the way the world is now, anything is possible. Wayne, thanks. David is in Nottingham. Well done to Nottingham Forest in their promotion to the Premiership today. I was right behind them. I was rooting for the Forest. David, go ahead.
Brilliant result today, George. And I know you're a Man U fan, and so am I, because I was born in Manchester, but I live in Nottingham. So now I don't know which side of the end.
At least we need more Reds. We need more Reds in the Premiership, don't we?
Yes, yes. But I don't know which end to sit at now. When I'm at Trent End, I don't know whether to support Forest or Man U, because I live in Nottingham and I was born in Manchester. So I'm in a dilemma.
Go ahead,
Anyway,
sir. Go ahead.
My point. My point is all empires in history and mainly built on military, and they overstretch the military and then they collapse. Now, never in history has there been an empire that has had the power to destroy the whole earth, in trying to.
That's right.
That's
the difference.
Yeah, and I think we're in a really dangerous situation, George, because the dollar is done. Yeah, it is. It's finished. It is. They've poisoned the earth.
Yeah, even the smart papers in America have acknowledged that the Chinese parallel payment system, which more and more people, including satrapies of America like Saudi Arabia, are signed up to now, mean that the days of the dollar as a reserve currency are very definitely over. The US has printed $5 trillion and is complaining about inflation, surprised about inflation. The reality is the US is a sun that is setting. The sun that is rising is the one that's rising in the east. They could have, if they'd had more grace or more sense, tried to help the east rise so that all boats rose at the same time, that everyone's economy was dependent on the other. They could have applied science, but instead they applied threats and belligerence and militarism, and it has spectacularly failed. David, thanks, and the best of luck next season, whoever you are supporting. The last call that we have time for, I'm afraid, is Peter in Warrington on Amber Heard. I'm all ears, Peter.
Oh, hi, George. How are you this evening?
All good, thank you. What would you like to say?
Well, it's pure theatre. I've watched some of it on YouTube and on TV, and to me, it is Hollywood at its best. It just looks like entertainment. It looks as though it's choreographed, and I have to say some of it looks as though it's CGI to me, computer-generated imagery. These two top actors are grossly overpaid in my view, and that is a slightly separate question, because I think the Hollywood elite are on stupid amounts of money. I think the footballers are on ridiculous salaries, and we need some kind of direction. There are people, cleaners are earning £8 an hour, and these guys are on ridiculous amounts for making movies. Now, okay, they're talented people, but they're not that talented. And in the case of these two, well, crikey, they're flawed people, and
very flawed, of course. I don't know anything about her. I should say that right up front, so I can't comment on her acting ability. But Johnny Depp is a film star, and these films make a tremendous amount of money. And it's only right that the actor in the film and actors in the film, the people without whom there would be no film, no successful film, are properly paid. It's called capitalism, isn't it? We can't abolish it in Hollywood whilst it exists everywhere else.
I mean, you'd expect some kind of reward commensurate with your talents, but have you seen the movie Greyhound with supposedly Tom Hanks in it?
No.
Well,
I would never go to see a film with Tom Hanks in it.
Fair enough.
That's another matter.
I get that, but that movie is CGI'd, computer-generated imagery. And there you go. So Tom Hanks wasn't even in on that movie. So is he really needed? I mean, No. So does Tom Hanks CGI get?
Yeah, but I suspect but I'm one of those who have never seen that movie and will never watch it, at least not now after you've told me. But I do watch a lot of movies, and these movies couldn't be made unless people paid for them. And a lot of people pay for them. And they make a lot of money for the studios, for the investors. And so I find it hard to get angry at someone like Johnny Depp getting a good whack, a good wedge, as we say in Britain, for making a film or a series of films like Pirates of the Caribbean that brought pleasure, delight to millions and engaged the talents of Hans Zimmer and his wonderful orchestra, one or two of whom are good friends of mine. So everybody gets paid. Their character is another matter, and their character emerges from trials like this as about as low as it's possible to get. And they're drug addicts and alcoholics. What a waste of talent, what a waste of money, and no good can come from it, as we've seen so vividly in the last weeks of that trial. But it is gripping viewing, that is for sure. I'll be back on Wednesday night with the Galloway show, only on YouTube. Please watch it. It's a different dynamic. It's only me, but many people think it is an interesting dynamic. But next Sunday, I'll be back here with the mother of all talk shows. I do hope that you'll join me and you'll bring others with you. I wish you good night.